Welcome back to Whole Bible Study with me, Taddy Noy. Yesterday in Exodus 33, we watched Moses refuse to move even an inch without God's presence and then ask to see God's glory. Today in Exodus 34 answers that request with covenant renewal and a fuller self-revelation of God's character. The backdrop is the golden calf breach, a people forgiven yet fragile, a leader interceding, and a covenant being rewritten after failure. This chapter is not just, quote, more laws, unquote. It is Israel learning who God is and how a rescue community is shaped in time, space, and daily habit. So now let's read from Exodus 34 together from the NIV version. Let's see, I got to get and I'm going to be directly reading, so I'm sorry again if I have to turn away from the camera a little bit. But for copyright reasons, I'll read directly from it instead of reprinting it and publishing it in my teleprompter. So here we go, Exodus 34. All right. Sorry, it takes me a couple seconds. I'm using an interlinear Bible, and it has the King James New International Living Standard or Living Bible and Revised Standard editions in it. And we're reading directly from the, we're reading from the New International Version. So here we go. The Lord said to Moses, "Chisel out 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and I will write on them the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. Be ready in the morning, and then come up on Mount Sinai. Present yourself to me there on the top of the mountain. No one is to come with you or be seen anywhere on the mountain. Not even the flocks and herds may graze in front of the mountain." So Moses chiseled out 2 stone tablets like the first ones and went up the mountain, went up Mount Sinai early in the morning as the Lord had commanded him. And he carried the 2 stone tablets in his hands. Then the Lord came down in the cloud and stood there with him and proclaimed his name, the Lord, and he passed in front of Moses proclaiming, quote, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of their fathers to the 3rd and 4th generation, unquote. Moses bowed to the ground at once and worshipped. "O Lord, if I have found favor in your eyes," he said, then let the Lord go with us. Although this is a stiff-necked people, forgive our wickedness and our sin, and take us as your inheritance. Then the Lord said, "I am making a covenant with you before all of your people. I will do wonders never before done in any nation in all the world. The people you live among will see how awesome is the work that I, the Lord, will do for you. Obey what I command you today. I will drive out before you the Amorites, Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land where you are going, or they will be a snare among you. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, and cut down their Asherah poles. Do not worship any other god. If the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land. For when they prostitute themselves to their gods and sacrifice to them, they will invite you, and you will eat their sacrifices. And when you choose some of their daughters as wives for your sons, and those daughters prostitute themselves to their gods, they will lead your sons to do the same. Do not make cast idols. Celebrate the feast of the unleavened bread. For the 7 days eat bread made out of yeast, as I commanded you. Do this as the appointed time in the month of Abib, for in that month you came out of Egypt. The first offspring of every womb belongs to me, including all of the firstborn males of your livestock, whether from herd or stock or flock. Redeem the firstborn donkey with a lamb, but if you do not redeem it, break its neck. Redeem all your firstborn sons. No one is to appear before me empty-handed. 6 days you shall labor, but on the 7th day you shall rest. Even during the plowing season and harvest you must rest. Celebrate the Feast of Weeks with the first fruits turn of the year. 3 times a year all your men are to appear before the sovereign Lord, the God of Israel. I will drive out nations before you and enlarge your territory, and no one will covet your land when you go up 3 times each year to appear before the Lord your God. Do not offer the blood of a sacrifice to me along with anything else, anything containing yeast, and do not let any of the sacrifice of the Passover feast remain until morning. See. Bring the best of the fruit of the first fruits of your soil to the house of the Lord your God. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. Then the Lord said to Moses, write down these words, for in accordance with these words I have made a covenant with you and with Israel. Moses was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights without eating bread or drinking water. And he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hands, he was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord. When Aaron and all the Israelites saw Moses' face was radiant, and they were afraid to come near him. But Moses called to them, so Aaron and all the leaders of the community came back to him, and he spoke to them. Afterward, all the Israelites came near him, and they gave him all the commands the Lord had given him on Mount Sinai. When Moses finished speaking to them, he put a veil over his face. But whenever he entered the Lord's presence to speak with him, he removed the veil until he came out. And when he came out and told the Israelites what had been commanded, they saw that his face was radiant. Then Moses would put the veil back over his face until he went to speak with the Lord. Arise. That was Exodus chapter 34. Exodus chapter 34 opens kind of like a legal restoration ceremony in the ancient Near East. New tablets, quote, like the first, a dawn's ascent, strict boundary instructions, and a meeting at the Mount Summit. Now, early Israelite hearers would have recognized treaty language. After a vassal's treachery, the suzerain could simply replace the vassal. Instead, the Lord commands Moses to return with freshly cut stone, signaling that the covenant will be renewed with mercy rather than annulled with wrath. Now, the exclusion of flocks, and even the hum of ordinary life from the mountain reinscribes holiness in social space. This is not a casual errand, but the reconstitution of Israel's identity. What follows is the theological heartbeat of the chapter, and in many ways of the Torah's portrait of God. The Lord descends in the cloud and proclaims his name, repeating it for solemn emphasis, and then interpreting it in moral terms: compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping covenant love to thousands, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, and yet not wiping away guilt as though it were nothing. In the polytheistic world that surrounded Israel, divine glory was usually narrated in the register of might, storm, and victory. Here, glory is disclosed as character. The vocabulary itself is covenantal. Hest, steadfast, loyal love, and emet, faithfulness and reliability, communicate a God whose, quote, weight or kavod is measured, not only in cosmic power, but by durable goodness. So the early audience would have heard a reassurance. The one who rules us is the one whose mercy outruns his wrath. Even the difficult line about consequences, quote, to the third and fourth generation, unquote, sits deliberately beside steadfast love to the 2000s of generations, a ratio that stacks the scales in favor of mercy. In agrarian kinship societies where patterns echo through households, the text acknowledges that sin leaves ripples, yet frames God's intent over overwhelmingly restorative. Moses' reaction, falling low and asking God to accompany a, quote, stiff-necked people, forgive them and take them as his inheritance, models intercession that doesn't minimize sin, yet clings to God's self-definition. A leader in Israel is not the strongest warrior or the shrewdest strategist, but the one who knows God's name and argues from it for the good of the people. For the original hearers, this prayer was pastoral and political. It legitimated Moses' authority as advocacy, not domination. God answers with covenant renewal and with stipulations that aim at the same problem that produced the calf, porous boundaries that invite syncretism. In Highland Canaan and the southern Levant political agreements were sealed with feasts before local deities, and agricultural cycles were saturated with rites that yoked fertility and cult. The commands in Exodus 34 were therefore reconstruct Israel's social world. Do not cut treaties that entangle you in their cultic meals. Tear down high place markers, altars, pillars, groves that map the land as belonging to other gods. The divine name, quote, jealous, is not pettiness. In covenant idiom, it declares exclusive claim, as a faithful spouse is jealous for the marriage bond. Israel is to be a distinct people whose shared meals, pilgrimages, and calendar do not quietly chastise them back into Egypt under new names. The calendar instructions embedded theology in time. So the festival of unleavened bread returns the community each spring to its foundational story, deliverance from Egypt, so that the year's first harvest is interpreted as grace rather than self-made abundance. Weeks and ingathering align with wheat and autumn harvests, but the pilgrimages relocate gratitude in Jerusalem's future liturgy and here in seed form at a central sanctuary. The astonishing promise that no one will covet their land while they are away counters the most basic fear of smallholder households. Quote, if we obey, we will be exposed, unquote. The Lord pledges to hold back opportunists while his people travel to celebrate him. Sabbath, too, is recast against agrarian anxiety. Even in plowing and harvest, the two narrow windows that decide family survival, Israel will rest. Weekly rest is not self-care rhetoric. It's the resistance to slavery economy and the confession that providence outruns prudence. Firstborn and first fruits laws teach the same grammar. In household religion around the Levant, fertility rites sought to bend life's forces to human need. Israel's rites invert that logic. The first and the best are returned to God because life is a gift, not leverage. Even the odd-sounding line about not boiling a young goat in its mother's milk pushes against a cultural instinct to instrumentalize the most intimate bonds of creation. Whether or not the command directly answers a known Canaanite rite, it undeniably teaches that you do not collapse life-giving relationships into life-taking symbolism. Israel's holiness codes then are not arbitrary tests, but a pedagogy in which ethics, ecology, and worship are braided. A narrative seam then ties practice back to presence. Moses remains with God for 40 days and nights without food or water, a sign that this is no ordinary mountain vigil, but a sustained encounter sustained by God. Here, the text subtly balances two emphases. Earlier, the tablets are, quote, written by the finger of God, and here Moses is told to write these words for an ancient audience. This is not a contradiction about authorship. It is a theology of stewardship. Revelation originates in God, and it's entrusted to human hands to be inscribed, taught, and lived. Now, when Moses descends, his face shines, and he does not know it. The Hebrew verb karan, not kuran, but karan, suggests beams or rays. Later readers will misread it as horns, but the picture in the text is radiant light. Israel recoils, not from Moses' authority, but from the reflected holiness. The veil Moses wears among the people, but removes in the Lord's presence, acknowledges the strain of glory on the ordinary life. The same presence that heals also overwhelms. Ancient hearers would not have parsed philosophical metaphysics here. They would have recognized a social truth. Intimacy with the holy changes a person, and that change creates both attraction and fear. Transformation is not a theory, but something seen in a human face. Pulling the threads together, Exodus 34 teaches Israel to live as a rescued people whose daily patterns, their weeks and years, their fields and their tables, their marriages and travel, their debts and celebrations align with the character God has named. The chapter's, quote, laws are not a random shelf of rules, but a design for communal wholeness in a land where the other designs seduce. The renewed tablets are not a reset button. They are a promissory note taken down the mountain by a leader whose skin itself bears witness that the proximity to God is the wellspring of distinctiveness. For the original audience, the message is immense. The God who forgives still expects fidelity. The God who punishes does so with a horizon where mercy is larger. The God whose presence once shattered Egypt now elects to dwell with a flawed people, training them to be human in his image. If we read with that audience, we feel the weight and relief of a covenant big enough to outlast failure and precise enough to shepherd everyday life away from the altars that promise control and deliver bondage. Exodus 34 shows that God renews covenant not by lowering holiness, but by drawing his people into his character, steadfast love, his faithfulness and patience and justice. Moses' radiant face is a living sign that the time with God remakes us. As you move through your day, consider this. Where could your rhythms, work, rest, meals, promises be realigned so that your life quietly reflects the one whose goodness passed before Moses on the mountain? Thank you for joining me today for this chapter study, and I will see you tomorrow next time in the next chapter. God bless you all, and thank you so much.